Okay, so there have been a lot of questions, really over the last couple of years, on the Centers to Gate School about how to use a metronome. So I'm going to try to do kind of a very basic tutorial and just cover a little bit about a proper way to play with a metronome. I'm also using a metronome program on my PC called Asparion, Asparion. You can use any metronome app. You can use an actual physical metronome, be it an analog one that has the arm that swings back and forth, or a digital metronome that just counts out. This was a simple free metronome program for my PC, and for the purpose of this example, I've got it set on a very, very low tempo in a lot of ways just so I don't screw up. It's about demonstrating how one uses a metronome. So a metronome will start with typically with either just keeping a beat, tap, 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 or with more modern metronomes, you see a lot more 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and some of them can be programmed for different time signatures and whatever. But 4/4 is the common signature for the bulk of music and for practicing along to a metronome. And here's how it sounds: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Okay, so you see it goes. You can hear distinct notes or types of beats for the 1 and the 3, and then there's just kind of a click for the 2 and the 4. This mirrors the way a very basic rock drum beat would go, with the kick on the 1 and the snare on the 3. Okay, so then how do we practice along with that? We're practicing a whole note. A whole note is one note across the entire measure, across the entire 4 beats. So how that looks, if you were practicing, just getting going, learning a pattern, you want to play it really slow, you'd look at it like this. And so on. Obviously, that's very slow. That is, in my meager representation, a whole note. When you see that one circle in there. Now, what happens if you then move down to wanting to do half notes? This little guy, it's got the tail, but it's also open. It's hollow in the middle, right here. That is a half note, and that is 2 of the 4 count. So if I hit a half note, I'm going half note, half note. Okay, so there's your half note. Now, you see it's twice as fast because instead of a whole, we're doing a half. So there's 2 notes instead of 1, breaking that 1 down into 2 halves. And that trend can continue if we move on to the quarter note. Quarter note is like a $quarter, quarter of anything. 1/4 of anything is that item broken down into 4s. Tell this one because it's got a tail and it's also solid. Okay, now the quarter note is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So okay, so and we can continue that on and go through the whole scale, but you're getting the idea. For every tap on the metronome, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's a note. That's a quarter note. Okay, this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. We get into things like eighth notes. You can see it looks just like a quarter note, but there's that little tail on top here. That denotes that it's an eighth note. You like my high-tech way of doing this? Yeah, no shit printed on the screen here, kids. This is old school. So it's an eighth note, and as you can guess, an eighth note it's half of a quarter note. If you remember your math and your fractions, this all works just like fractions. Okay, so an eighth note, there are 8 of them in a whole measure. Okay, now since our metronome divides things into 4s, that means there are 2 notes for every click. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and okay, so you hear that? That's your eighth notes. Every single time you hear a click or a tap coming from that metronome, you're playing one note and another note before the next click on that metronome. And working with a metronome, you want your note strike, I mean, I'm not focusing on it right now, but you want your note strike to happen exactly with that click on the metronome. This is how you build your timing. This is how you learn how to play along with a drummer. And you can actually use a drum machine for this. You know, you can set up a simple beat on a drum machine and you can do it that way. Whether it's, you know, like the old style when I was a kid, how you had a programmable electronic drum machine box and you'd sit and you'd tap out a beat and it would remember it. Or, you know, more modern, which I also use now, like EZdrummer and other, you know, drumming applications that can create really great realistic sounding drum beats. So, but either way, you know, drumming, the whole point of a metronome is to get you playing in time. And if you were a rock musician or, you know, anything around rock, pop, jazz, blues, anything, if there's a drummer, everybody plays to the drummer. You keep your time with the drums. No matter how flashy a drummer can be, Mike Portnoy, Brooks Wackerman, whoever, the Rev, you know, their focus first and foremost is on keeping time. Of a drummer that can't keep time, it doesn't matter how flashy they are. It doesn't matter how many amazing fills they can play. If they can't keep time, they're not a good drummer. End of story. You had one job, drummer. That's it. So, you know, learning how to play along a metronome is really, in a lot of ways, learning how to play along with a drummer. And so we want to do that. So we just covered basic eighth notes there. Then you get into interesting things called triplets. Okay? Now, triplets are often represented this way. You can see 3 eighth notes because that's a tail. That bar across the top is the tail, the single tail. And there's a number 3 over it. Now, the interesting thing about this is that means there's a 3 count, 3 eighth notes. This is where the math gets really fuzzy because they're called eighth notes, but they're really not. That number 3 over it makes it a triplet. So when you're getting into eighth note triplets, you're really looking at 3 distinct and equal notes inside of that quarter note. So let's listen along with our metronome. Okay, you hear that? We're doing 3 notes for every click of that metronome. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, because we still want to acknowledge the 4 quarter notes of the measure. So you're breaking each quarter note, each 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, down into subsections. So that's kind of how that one works. The triplets can be a hard thing to get mentally, but it's important to get it. And then the last one we'll go into, because after that you're getting into some really complex ideas, is 16th notes. So 16th notes, same thing, you know, 1/16 of an inch, right? There are 4/16 in a quarter inch. So, and none of that's going to make any sense to you know, the folks overseas who have moved into this century and use metric. But you still have, you know, 16ths and quarters, and you still know your fractions, right? So 16th note is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. So there again, you know, you can kind of see now why I'm playing so slowly with the metronome, right? Because now we have to fit 4 notes into each and every beat. So it's going to be like this. Bum notes notwithstanding, I think you get the idea. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. There are a lot more things that you can add or subtract to it, but that is a good way to get going with a metronome and develop an understanding of it and how it works and how you work within it. The important thing when you're working on a piece of music or a scale practice or anything along to a metronome is to time your pick strike to that first beat, or the note that has to happen on that 1, 2, 3, 4. You're working on getting it to happen exactly on that. If you happen a little ahead of it or you happen a little behind it, then you're missing the point of the metronome. The whole goal is to get synchronized with that metronome. So hope this is helpful. I'll see you on the SimGate School. Rock on.